Excellent. Right, now we're all here. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's just turned 2 o'clock. Welcome to August's meeting of the Planning West Committee. My name's Simon Coles, and I have the privilege of chairing this committee meeting. We're not expecting a fire drill today, so if the fire alarm sounds, please leave the building by the green indicated fire exit doors and gather outside at the rear car park. This meeting is being recorded and will be streamed on YouTube. Therefore, any members of the public present should be aware that they may be recorded even if they are not participating in the meeting. If this causes you any concern, can you please let me know now? I'm not seeing any concerns raised. Okay, excellent. In that case, we will move on. Item 1, apologies for absence.
Thank you, Chair. We have apologies from Councillor Caroline Ellis, Andy Hadley, Derek Perry and Stephen Pugsley. Councillor Dawn Johnson is substituting for Caroline Ellis.
Excellent, thank you. Item 2 is the minutes from the meeting of June the 25th. Is it your wish that I sign those as a true record of that meeting? Yep. Can I have a seconder? Thank you, Dawn. And those in favour, please. Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you. Declarations of interest. I have one which I suspect is for all of us. I've received an email from Mr. Pakes, who's here to speak to the item in question. I believe it was sent to all others, all other members of the committee. Also, it was summarised for the briefing note this morning in the papers today. So everybody should have had the chance to look at that. And Mr. Pakes, as I say, is here, and I'm sure he will make all those same points when he comes to his 3 minutes. Other than that, I've no other declarations. Are there any other declarations, ladies and gentlemen? Not seeing any. I'm not seeing any. Okay, in that case, we'll move on. Public question time, Martin?
We haven't, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we'll move on to the meat of the agenda then. Item 5 on your agenda, which is application 38/24/0104, and that's the footbridge across the Tone at Somerset Square and Coal Orchard, Taunton. Our planning officer is Gareth Clifford. Gareth, good afternoon and welcome. And when you're ready.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, the application is for a new pedestrian and cycle bridge close to the Morrison's store in Taunton. So it's a new bridge and ramps replacing the existing structure. It's an important link for the National Cycle Network, Route 3. Forms an important route across town to the railway station, Barbury Park. Externally funded through the Future High Streets grant. It's part of the Garden Town vision, and as you'll see from the report, there are a number of objections and petition local residents. So that's the site of the bridge across Morrison's, and while that's up, I'll just briefly cover the various options that have been looked at in the past. The boulevard, effectively, you can see my cursor, will run up through that line to the station, and there's the Market Bridge further downstream as well. Both of those options take the landing point onto the southern side. However, there's an issue there in that the current footway has a very narrow pinch point running along behind the cricket club. And there would be issues in having to widen that, both in terms of cost and flood risk. as it would have to be projecting out over the existing course of the river. There was a previous application which was withdrawn, which effectively ran a new bridge diagonally across the river from the brew house side roughly to where the bandstand is. There were concerns over that for a number of reasons, including the extent of the new ramps, the flood risk, and tree loss. And following on from that scheme, a design review was held to look at the potential other options, and the current scheme has come forward as a result of that, which seeks to effectively replace the existing bridge in its current position, but wider. And benefits of that are effectively it utilises the existing brick abutments to a large extent and therefore avoids flood risk. So that's an overview, effectively an aerial shot of the site with the existing bridge. While that's up, there are a number of trees running along the riverside, and you'll see in the report that 4 of those are proposed to come out as a result of the current scheme due to the ramp. But there are existing trees to the north of the existing wall on the Morrison's side of the site, which would not be touched as a result of the scheme, so we'll retain some tree cover in that location. So that's a shot showing the red line site area and the extent of the existing bridge with steps on that side and a ramp on this side, on the Morrison side, and then there are steps and a ramp on the brew house side. So that's the effectively existing bridge elevations. And that shows effectively the layout of the proposed scheme with a placement steps on the brew house side and a slightly widened ramp. Obviously a new ramp on the Morrison side to accommodate the necessary gradients, and then a set of steps replacing the ramp that exists at the moment. Now, one of obviously the disbenefits of that scheme is effectively if you're going to avoid the steps up from into Morrison's from a flood risk point of view, as per the existing situation, you have to go around the corner down towards Midlands Lane and then turn back on yourself to get into the level area that runs around Morrison's itself. So that is the elevations of the new bridge, looking upstream and downstream, and then the elevation that will be outside of on the Morrison side, and then a cross section at the bottom there through the brew house side. So effectively you're retaining the existing wall, the new bridge section, and they'll have to adjust the link down to the existing pontoon. And that there shows effectively the ramping proposed on that northern side. So that meets the standards in LTN 120. And that shows shows in detail the contours, but it also shows the section of the new steps that are going in to serve the bridge. So that's an existing drainage layout. So there's existing Wessex water drains which effectively run under the river, and there is a maintenance point that has to be maintained from an access point of view. hence the need for the ramp to stick close to the river to maintain the access to the north. Then landscaping, so there'll be 4 trees on the northern side will come out. There will be replacements there, and it says in the report, effectively will be a replacement on per 3 basis. But there's scope on both sides of the river corridor for replacement landscape planting. And that's just the detail of the revised seating area near the brew house. So that's then your main elevation or treatment of what the bridge and the ramp is going to look like, effectively taken from the end of the pontoon looking towards town. So visually, the bridge is not going to look dissimilar to effectively what we've got at the moment. And that's a significant improvement over what was proposed in the previous scheme that was withdrawn. Illustration of the view from effectively what will be the ramp towards the new bridge. And that is obviously an existing shot looking towards Morrison's from outside of the brew house. So this section through here will be widened in terms of the ramp up to the new bridge. And the new bridge effectively will be widened to 4 meters. So effectively it's widening on both sides to achieve the necessary width. So you'll get new steps up to that platform area of the bridge on the brew house side. And on the Morrison side, effectively, you will extend the ramp in lieu of these steps out down towards these trees. So effectively, the 4 nearest trees on this side are being removed. But the majority of that 3 on the left actually is within the Morrison's car park side. That's a view looking back towards the steps. View from under the trees, roughly at the end of the ramp, looking back. So that tree, that one, and that one will come out. But that one there and that one there effectively are the other side of the wall, and so I'll be touched. That's a view looking at the existing ramp that will be replaced by steps, and there again. So as I say, that's one of the disbenefits of this scheme, because it will mean people will have to double back on themselves to maintain the that level area without steps. Now, this is supported in terms of policy and has been supported effectively since the Taunton Area Action Plan was adopted in 2008 and has been supported since in various iterations through the core strategy and CP6 and the most recent site allocations and development management plan under A3. So it supports the provision of the national cycle route across town, and it provides an all users bridge across the river. So the main issues there are, from a design point of view, it's considered the best available option. The boulevard lines up with the southern side where you've got a footpath that is really not feasible to improve its width due to the constrictions of the cricket club and the river. Design of the bridge itself is not considered poor and a significant improvement over the withdrawn scheme. The flood risk is considered acceptable, and there's a condition on from the Environment Agency, and the current option limits the flood risk by utilising the existing abutments. The safety aspect of the scheme is considered acceptable. There will be warning signs provided in relation to the new bridge, but it's not uncommon to have obviously bridges which are joint users in terms of both cycling and pedestrians. The design and appearance is considered an acceptable one and not to adversely impact the character of the area. The trees will be replaced, and the ecologist is recommending a condition to address wildlife and also the lighting issues in relation to the bridge. In summary, the principle is considered to comply with the national and local planning policy taken as a whole. It will not be a significant adverse impact on the character and amenity of the area. The impact on drainage and flood risk is considered acceptable. The trees to be lost will be replaced, and there's not considered to be an adverse impact on highway safety or any other matters of acknowledged planning importance, and the application is recommended for approval.
Thank you very much. Now we have one public speaker on this, Mr. Peggs. Good afternoon to you, sir. If you'd like to come up to the public speaking desk, and when you're comfortable, push the right-hand button, the red light will come on, and your 3-minute speaking time starts when you start speaking, sir. So thank you, good afternoon and welcome. Right-hand button.
Thank you. We did a survey on a typical Wednesday, and we found that over 3,000 people actually crossed that bridge. That's 3,000 pedestrian movements. There were 96 people who went across with prams, 20 with buggies, 25 with walking aids, and only 150 cyclists. Now that represents only 5% of the traffic that crosses that bridge. So 90% of the people who go across that bridge actually walk or go by buggy or by some other means, but not by bike. So it's a pedestrian bridge. Route 3, the national cycle route, came later. If you remember, originally it actually came across the old bridge to the cattle market and went across onto the south side and came up the way. There's no reason why that particular route should not be reinstated, because that will reduce the pressure on the Morrison's Bridge. Now, great talk has been talked about Firepool, and all these people are going to cycle across from Firepool when it's developed. I suspect that most of them actually will come by foot, because it's only a few hundred yards before you're into the town centre. And as for the railway station, well, I've checked with the railway station and they say the majority of people actually cycle to the station and very few actually cycle from the railway station. So that, again, that demand is over-egged. And quite frankly, I think it won't, because of this pinch point on the bridge, I don't think that's going to significantly affect the vibrancy of the town centre. The design, I think, is appalling, better perhaps than the last one, but still pretty bad. It's 4 meters wide. That's the same width as the bridge that crosses the railway line at Chip Lane. It's, quite honestly, I don't think it's going to increase the safety of that bridge. Rather, I think it's going to make it worse, because in fact it's unsegregated and it will, I think, lead to speeding of cycles up the ramp. Now, the amenity has really not been mentioned at all within the report. I think it significantly affects the amenity of that area. People love that area. They love that bridge. They're very attached to it. It's human scale. The new one isn't. It's more industrial. And I think the other advantage of that bridge is because it is narrow and because the ramps are narrow, you actually get self-regulation of people. People actually get off their bikes or they slow down on their bikes. This eye-to-eye contact which slows traffic down and makes it safe. It is an asset, that river. It's not an obstacle, it's an asset. And you've got to say to yourself, does this really improve that asset? I would say it doesn't. In fact, it actually ruins that particular part, which is a fine urban space, carefully designed. I would urge you to defer considering this application until you've had further look at that site.
Thank you very much, Mr. Peggs. Councillors, comments or questions? I have one for Mr. Clifford to start us off. The tree replacement programme, am I right in saying because we're removing mature trees that we will be asking for more mature specimens to be replaced rather than perhaps something as insubstantial as a whip?
That's certainly correct, yeah.
Okay, thank you for that. Councillor Fatherhigh, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm not doing very well. Just a clarification here, really. I understand the funding is coming from the Future High Street Fund. What happens if this project is delayed or not implemented? How would that impact our funding with Future High Street?
My understanding is it's linked to that specific project. So effectively, if the project doesn't go ahead, then the funding is lost. It's not a transferable fund, it's a specific grant for a specific project.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Gareth, as part of the one of the concerns was the gradient, which I think was going to be improved by a couple of they call them landings, I suppose. But it says in the report there's two, but I only noticed one in the report. Can we just have a quick look if you could show me where they are? I'll tell my phone to stop buzzing. Expected spam.
There's one at the top and there's one lower down.
One at the top is on this. Oh, I see what you mean, because the bridge does have a slight.
So there's actually one, there's one here.
Okay. I mean, and that presumably means that the inclines up to those points are the maximum permissible, since they're outside the permitted limits. Is that right? In terms of a compromise to get the job done.
Yes,
It would be very long.
Yeah, I mean, it's a compromise solution because obviously ideally you'd like to keep the ramp on the other side as well, rather than replace it with steps. But because the fact that you're increasing the width and the height, well, no, you're not increasing the height, you're increasing the width of the landing at the top of the bridge. Obviously that's extending it out. And
Okay.
therefore the gradient is therefore steeper and non-compliant on the sort of southern side in that view. And obviously the design of the ramp to the north is compliant and is one of the reasons obviously why it extends so far to the north, and unfortunately you've got to lose the trees to be able to get it in.
Yeah. I mean, I'm going to display some appalling ignorance because I can't remember what it looks like at the moment. But I'm assuming that the gradient we're going to end up with this bridge is better than the one that's there at present. Is that correct? In terms of wheelchair and access for those with lesser mobility. So from that point of view, we're looking at an improved situation.
So, sorry, swings and roundabouts.
The gentleman just referred to the number of cyclists using it. And I think there was a comment made about cyclists coming from the station. I mean, this will be a two-way route. So, and I'm assuming that the intention is to attract cyclists rather than having them running through the middle of town. So, and it will be wide enough. But is there going to be a segregation on the bridge, or is it going to be what you might describe as a potential free-for-all? In which case, everybody will have to be very careful.
No, obviously, we are trying to encourage cyclists. I mean, Active Travel England obviously have commented on it and are happy with it. No, they wouldn't be segregated, but obviously the intention is to provide warning signs in relation to the new bridge and the usage of it.
I suppose in a way, it's a situation a bit like removing traffic controls on the roads, that everybody is extra vigilant when using it. Anyway, thank you very much.
Rosemary?
Yeah, can you hear me? Yeah. I was somewhat confused when I read this, and I haven't been able to, from what you've said, see why. It said that pedestrians would have to go further for this bridge to get onto the bridge. Is that because they have to go further to the steps, or is this? To get to the ramp onto this bridge. Yeah. Yeah, and I'm also I am concerned once you start, when you've got cyclists and pedestrians and cyclists aren't careful, you don't know which side of you they're coming up your back, to be honest. And now they don't use bells. Well, they don't seem to where I am. It does pose problems. Whereas if you have to get off your bike, they're not going to come up your back in the same way. That's my objection to this, really, that by mixing the bikes and the pedestrians, you're making it more dangerous. And why? Because we got a grant for it. That shouldn't be the reason to actually say we're going to have it, because the money's got to come from somewhere.
Okay, thank you, Rosemary. Mike Rigby, please. Mike.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to thank Mr. Pakes for his comments. It's always useful to hear from a fellow town planner as to what he thinks on the proposals, although I disagree in a number of areas, perhaps the most notable being the fact that while the survey that he and his colleagues undertook may have indicated that there weren't a lot of cycles on the bridge, I think that's an inevitable consequence of the fact that it isn't really suitable for them. That's really the purpose of this application, is to encourage more cyclists to use it. And I've never really, as a cyclist, I've never really been a big fan of the idea of being advised to get off it and walk it. The point is that you're supposed to be on it, cycling it, because it's significantly quicker than walking. So we want to keep people on their bikes for as long as possible when they're on this route or any other route in the town. And we want to encourage more cyclists to use the bridge and the path in general. Councillor Wren's picked up on another point I was going to make about the fact that apparently people cycle to the railway station, but not from it. Was it that way around? Which means there must be a ton of bicycles cluttering the place up. The bottom line is, you know, it's a two-way path, and I don't know which way people are going, but the whole point is that not only can people get to the railway station on a bike, but they can get across the whole of the town on a push bike. I hear the point about concern about conflict between pedestrians and cyclists on the bridge, but we heard the same when we pedestrianised St James Street and allowed cycles to carry on using it. And, you know, despite the initial doom mongering, you know, it hasn't resulted in any great conflict there. So I think that has been able to work quite well. This proposal is, in my view, much better than the previous proposal. And I thank Mr. Pakes for his comments on that, which will have contributed to, I think, the review, along with the fact that we were able to get our engineers to have another look at it. We did think about this proposal initially, but were advised that for engineering reasons, the bridge couldn't be adapted properly. But it's amazing, as with lots of things, you speak to a different engineer and apparently it can. So here we are, and I'm very pleased. Thank you.
Thank you. Dave Mansell, followed by Norman Cappell, please, David.
Thank you. Mike, I was going to make some similar points, so I do agree with what's just said regarding the cycle use of the bridge. Clearly, it is to create a new route and encourage more cyclists and enable more cyclists to gain access along the corridor planned. That said, and which is something I certainly think to be, you know, very worthwhile and important. I feel it might have been helpful if we'd had someone sort of from the applicant, which I presume is other officers within the council, perhaps just to explain maybe a little bit more what they were planning to achieve. And I think that might be particularly helpful, and whether anyone is here is able to comment on why it is unsegregated, what the thinking is on that. I feel it should be okay. I would like to quite know what the thinking is on that, because often though, and as a cyclist and a pedestrian at times, I do actually quite like to know where I'm meant to be. And actually when you don't know where you're meant to be, it does sometimes feel like when conflict may be more likely to occur. So if anyone can help with the thinking on that, I'd be interested. I guess if that aspect was a problem, then maybe, you know, still possible to do something about it. So that is sort of a question, if there's anyone here who can answer. And I've got two other questions. Just on the trees, could it just be confirmed? It was indicated, but I didn't sort of quite fully pick up. So if it could just be indicated again quite clearly. I've gathered where the 4 are being lost from, and I gather there's 2 on site and 10 off site being provided. Could it just be, if I've understood correctly, could it be confirmed where the new ones on site will be? And my other question was just, again, if I've understood things right on the ramps, a point is being made that on the north side, people using the ramp that's there at the moment, that gets them sort of straight into Morrison's where they wish to go. But with the new scheme, the ramp is on the other side, so they will have to go down a longer ramp and come back again, so take a longer route. When I heard that, I did make me sort of think, well, why isn't the ramp on the other side being kept? Why has it got to be replaced with steps? Is there a reason why the existing ramp couldn't be kept there to overcome that problem? Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, the 2 new trees effectively are going in there and there, so they're close to where the existing trees are. Right, so there. It's not segregated because segregation would require a wider bridge, and a wider bridge would mean greater construction and presumably more expense as well. I did raise this issue in terms of trying to retain the existing ramp, but because they're having to build out the platform for the width of the new bridge, you haven't then got the same degree of gradient that you need to achieve in what is a relatively small area running down from that side towards the gates at Hammersmith Wharf.
Norman, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Interesting, the report about it's a pedestrian bridge, and as a cyclist, I would quite agree with him, because you're asked to get off your bike to go across that bridge, which slows you up. We've got the M5 for motorway, for the cars coming by past Taunton. Probably C5 is the canal towpath. And that's where the vast majority of the bikes, of course, come from at the moment that head into Taunton town. And as one of them, I hop over the market, small bridge into the old market car park, or very old car park now, and I travel along the Brewhouse side of the river. I would do that, of course, because otherwise I would have to cycle through the pedestrians visiting Morrison's, past Morrison's, and then come back up the ramp of which I'm supposed to walk over. So it's an awful lot quicker. So no, you won't see cyclists in large number at the moment using the present bridge for that reason. They're already on the other side, travelling into town. Yes, great improvement it will be. It complies with LN 120. Most LN 120 routes don't have a big problem with cyclists running down pedestrians. It's quite a wide route in actual fact. So a bit of consideration by both users, and it works very well. The other thing I'd like to comment on, Mr. Chairman, is no development should take place, including demolition. Is this bridge well past its sell-by date, or is it still a good bridge? I understand it to be still a good bridge. So rather than demolish, could some care be taken about taking it down so it could be reused? Because I can think of a number of places where it could be reused, and I suspect others could as well.
And
Thank
not
you,
a million miles away, Norman. Gareth, I don't know if you have any comments you want to come back on? Okay. First try.
It's about the segregation. Obviously, at the moment, it's going to be cyclists and pedestrians going to be meandering and walking across. Could you not have it so it's on the left-hand side, people walk across, and on the other side, cyclists come? Can you not segregate it in a certain way whereby one side could be, because otherwise you've got a free-for-all, people meandering on the bikes and people walking around, you know, can you not segregate it in terms of pedestrians walk to the left, cyclists coming that way, stay to the left?
I think I'm right in saying that this, the required hierarchy is part of the cycling route information. I'm not quite sure how it does it. I'm not a cyclist. My knee doesn't allow me to cycle. Gareth, is there anything you want to come back on?
No, I don't think so. Thank you.
Go on.
Yeah, it's just on this segregation between pedestrians and cyclists. Is there any evidence supporting that being a preferable scenario than a free-for-all? And how much wider would the bridge need to be to accommodate something like that happening?
I don't know the answer to your second question in terms of how much wider. Clearly, there hasn't been an issue with similar bridges elsewhere. Otherwise, it wouldn't have been put forward as a suggestion in terms of the non-segregation of the bridge. There are presumably numerous bridges similar to that around the country which haven't had problems.
Okay. I'm not seeing anybody else that wants to comment on this, so we have a recommendation to approve that. Can I see a nomination for that, please? Thank you, Norman. Oh, sorry, Norman, my apologies.
My apologies. Could we add in something like consideration to be given to
About the bridge, yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
thank you.
I think before we get to the formality of this, can we add a note, Gareth, that careful removal of the bridge may enable it to be reused at another location to be discussed? Does that suit you, Norman?
Yeah.
And I'll just bring our lawyer in just to make sure I'm doing it right way.
Just to clarify, Chair, that would be an informative on the planning. Thank you.
Sorry, yes, as an informative. Okay, Norman, were you proposing that? You were, right, thank you, Norman. Is there a seconder, please? Thank you, Habib. Okay, and those in favour of that recommendation, please. I see, that's, eight, and are you against or abstaining? You're against, thank you, Rosemary. Okay, thank you. That is passed. Okay, thank you very much. Okay, we're gonna have a change of officers and, thank you, Gareth, and let's say if you can add that informative. There are several sites that spring readily to mind, that might be a suitable use of that bridge, if at all possible. Okay. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to move on to the second item on our agenda today, agenda item 6 in your pack, which is application number 14/23/0012. And it's the application for outline planning with all matters reserved except for access for the. Oh, right, okay. It's an application for outline planning with all matters reserved except for access for the erection of up to 5 dwellings and the formation of access on land to the north of Langhala Lane, Creech, St Michael. Presiding officer is Andrew Gunn. Andrew, good afternoon and welcome. And I see you're just getting the right slides up.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon. Good afternoon, everyone. Yeah, just quickly whizzing through the slides, make sure we get to the correct one. So there we are. Thank you. I'm sorry for the slight delay there.
No problem.
Yeah, so this is an application for outline. All matters reserved except for access. So we are considering access at this stage. So up to 5 dwellings. And as the chairman has just said, land north of Langhala Lane, Creech St Michael. I'll just take you through the slides just for covering the main issues. These do come. We're trying to get it up to full screen on the projector screen. There's some full screen on mine, but unfortunately not on the screen ahead of you. But you can see the application site to the bottom of that blue arrow. I've highlighted some of the listed buildings within the settlement at Langhala, nearest one being to the right. The buildings to the south of the road, you see the farm buildings are the ones you considered a couple of months ago. For 30 odd dwellings a couple of months ago, which was approved. I put this slide up because there has been some confusion about settlement boundaries. You can see Creech St Michael there, sort of at the bottom right in that blue, under that blue box. Oh, it's a bit clearer. So what I've done is where you can see application site in the centre of the site, the blue arrow, that is where the site is. And you can see the settlement boundary outline there in the thick black line. So it's within one of the Monkton Heathfield allocation development boundary, but it is shown in the plan on the Taunton inset map. Oh, fantastic. We've got the whole screen up. So thanks for that.
Thank you, Josh.
Thanks, Josh. So location plan, so you can see the site edged in red, the top part of the screen. Same landowner who, as I said a moment ago, had the application in at Manor Farm a couple of months ago, which members considered. A layout plan has been submitted, although I must stress it is just indicative. As I said, it's outlined. The details of the layout, design, landscaping, etc., are not sought for approval at this stage. This shows how a scheme of 5 could be accommodated on the site, but it is up to 5 as per the description. But that is just an indicative layout showing the access from the northern part of the site, and you've got the road on the right-hand side into Langhala. It shows existing site access. I've got some photographs in a moment that shows it from north end on the left, the main sort of road, Langhala Lane, and then it veers round on the right-hand side onto the track on the right-hand side, as along the northern boundary. You can see at the bottom section, I don't know if I've got a cursor here, that, yeah. But you can see the current footpath, you see the cursor there ends about there. If you turn into Langhala Lane, and the proposal were to extend the footpath around and into the site there. Here's some pictures of the site itself. So you can see on this is along the northern boundary, the site on the left-hand side. You'll note the trees that surround the site. There's a group TPOs that surround the site. You'll note the comments of the the tree officer in respect of those. And just showing into the site, so you see it's largely grassed at the moment. So a wider picture of the site with the farm site we mentioned earlier on in the background. So this is southwards from the site onto Langella Lane and onto the main road. See on the verge on the right-hand side, that's where the pavement will join to the existing pavement. That is the junction. So that's view westward and route to and from Monkton Heathfield if you're heading that way. It's a view showing the existing pavement heading westwards. That is the junction. That's heading the other way if you're heading towards Creech St Michael. That's the view across the road. Looking into the site, so you can see the trees along the boundary there. So in terms of key considerations, as I said, it's an outline application with approval sought for access only in regard to this application. As I mentioned earlier, it is within a settlement boundary. So the principal development is considered acceptable, obviously subject to consideration of all the other key issues. The Highway Authority have considered the access arrangements and consider those to be acceptable. Obviously, a detailed scheme would need to come forward, appropriate levels of parking, etc. In terms of heritage, I showed the pictures of the nearest listed building on the other side of Langalla Lane. The Conservation Officer assessed that and considered that it is acceptable relationship. A scheme should be able to come forward that would not harm the setting of the listed building. In terms of ecology and phosphates, the ecologist has reviewed the ecology report that was submitted with the application, raises no objections. In terms of phosphates, this scheme has sort of joined with the other scheme that I mentioned for 30 odd, because it's the same applicant, and there's an agreed phosphate mitigation scheme with that application. And in terms of residential amenity, it's considered that a scheme, whilst we're not considering design and layout, that a scheme could be satisfactorily accommodated on site there without any harm to the amenity, given the distances involved to the nearest residential property and the orientation of those properties, which largely face away. So it's not considered that a scheme could come forward. Well, it is considered that a scheme could come forward that would be satisfactory in terms of residential amenity. As an addition to the report, I understand. Can I go back? Exit. Too far. We have received a letter from West Monkton Parish Council, who are an adjoining parish, and I understand that Josh is kindly going to read that one out. So I'll get the slides back.
Thank you. Yeah, I'll
Oh,
read.
thank you, Chair.
Okay, so we've got the parish council have sent a letter in, which will be read by our clerk, Josh Barrett, and then we'll come to Simon Collier, who's the agent. So we'll start with Josh, please, when you're ready.
Thank you, Jay. Yeah, this comes from Amy Shepherd, Parish Council. I'll give myself 3 minutes as a normal public speaker. The Parish Council did not receive notification of this planning application when it was submitted, and upon becoming aware of it, discussed it at its meeting on the 13th of August and made the following comments in respect of the application. 14-230012, application for outline planning with all matters reserved, except for access for the erection of up to 5 dwellings and the formation of access on land to the north of Langalla Lane, Creech St Michael. The Parish Council objects to granting the granting of the permission for the following reasons. 5 dwellings are included in the proposal. The Parish Council has considered this to be overdevelopment of the site, and the proposed number of dwellings should be reduced to 3. It isn't clear from the submitted plans how the proposal was impacted by the road layout proposed as part of the MH2 planning application. The proposal includes detail of the proposed phosphate mitigation solution in order to achieve nutrient neutrality, and states that there will be a temporary fallowing of cattle grazing on the land, also owned by the applicant. Sufficient measures must be put in place to ensure the land is followed throughout the period that provides temporary mitigation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Collier, if you care to come up to the public speaking desk, you know the form by now. Welcome to the committee, sir. And when you're ready, push the right hand button, red light comes on, and your 3 minutes start when you start speaking. And welcome again to the committee.
Thank you, Chairman. Good afternoon. I'm Simon Collier of Collier Planning, and I'm speaking on behalf of the applicant. Members will recall voting unanimously to approve an application for housing on the other side of North End in June. This outline planning application by the same applicant was submitted at the same time in February of last year and followed a pre-application submission and positive advice from the council, which indicated that a planning application for the development proposed would be welcome. Indeed, at the pre-app meeting relating to the site opposite, it was your planning officer's idea that an application should also be made for housing on this site. The site is within the settlement boundary of Taunton and policy compliant in all respects. It includes biodiversity net gain and a site-specific phosphates offsetting scheme. There are no objections to the application from any statutory consultees. No significant amendments to the proposals have had to be made to the application since it was submitted in February of last year, but for various reasons which have been entirely out of the applicant's control, it is now 18 months later and a decision on the application is still eagerly awaited. Your support for the officer recommendation would therefore be very welcome so that the proposals can finally move forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Collier. Colleagues, Gwyl.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, interesting one, this. I have attracted comment in the past for some of the things I've said about neighbourhood plans, so I'm going to have to choose my words with care, shall we say. But one of the things that struck me reading the report was that there seems to be a slight misunderstanding at the heart of this, certainly in terms of the settlement boundary, and if it's in the settlement boundary of Monkton Heathfield, then it's clearly up for grabs for development, which it would appear seems to have come as a bit of a surprise to the parish council at Creech St Michael. And so I'm quite concerned how that apparent misunderstanding has arisen. There's reference in here to a green wedge within the neighbourhood plan, and I'll admit I'm not familiar with the neighbourhood plan, but certainly reading some of the comments, the purpose of a neighbourhood plan is to direct development, and it would seem that the parish council has been wrong-footed in this particular circumstance, because the boundary of Taunton and the Creech Heathfield actually seems to cross over into their parish, and there's, as I say, there seems to be a misunderstanding of that. So from that point of view, I think the principle of development on this site is going to be very difficult to refute, because it's clearly within the area and there are policies to support that. What I would like to know is that within this area, within any sort of development line, there must be some indicative uses laid out. And I would be very interested to know what the indicative uses of this particular small parcel of land were at the outset, whether they were for housing or whether, for example, they might be considered as potential strategic alternative green space or something like that. The other point I wanted to make is that this is an outline. So, of course, once you approve it, then the die is cast, and it talks about 5 houses, but there's actually nothing to stop the applicant coming back for a more intensive development if they want to, which they're more likely to get. So I would like to know how big it is, how big the parcel is. I should know this, but off the top of my head, I can't remember it. Also, it's quite interesting that West Monkton don't seem to be terribly happy about it either. But those are a few points I'd like to make at the outset, just to sort of clarify my mind, and I'd be very interested to hear what everybody else has got to say.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor, for your questions there. In terms of the size area, it's 0.23 hectares. It's 0.23 hectares. In terms of the designation, it has in the neighbourhood plan or in the local plan, has no formal designation as such. It's not a green wedge, it's not a protected site in any way. I did check that, as opposed to, obviously, there are parts in the the neighbourhood plan that do specify or designate such areas, but this isn't as such for that. In terms of your comment or question about the number of dwellings, the application is seeking up to 5. Obviously, if the applicant came in with wanted more in the future, they would have to come in for another application to consider that additional number. So they could come and reserve matters if it's allowed today. The scheme up to 5, they can come in with the reserve matters for up to 5. May not be 5, it would have to be assessed to see whether a 5 is acceptable or not in terms of design and layout. But if they wanted to increase that number, they would have to come in with a new application and make the case for additional numbers. One point, I don't know if it was your point or query that had been raised, I think it might have been in the Monkton Heathfield comments. There was a query raised about whether the scheme for that Monkton Heathfield scheme uses this land, crosses this land. It doesn't. It comes along the road frontage, obviously the red line for, I'll check with Simon Fox on this one, as the guru on Monkton Heathfield. The red line does come along to the southern part of the site, but not within the site, it's on the road and the pavement area, but doesn't cross into this site as such. So that is a separate site. I think, sorry if there's ever another point to cover there.
Yeah, sorry, can I just clarify that? It's plainly within the Monkton Heathfield site, within that boundary. But I think you just said it wasn't, so.
No, sorry, in terms of yes, you have a query about the settlement boundary. It's clear because it's about half a mile from the village of Creech St Michael itself. It's not within Creech St Michael's designated developed settlement boundary. However, there is a plan that I can go, you want me to show you?
Sliver of land.
But it is, as you can see there, they've got the application site. So you can see that purple area where it says application site, that's all the Monkton Heathfield. And you can see the thick black line that goes around the full extent of that. That is the settlement boundary. And you can see the Taunton to the west. And you can see at the bottom right-hand side, you can see Creech St Michael with its own defined, very tightly drawn around the existing settlement. That is their development settlement boundary. So it's within a settlement boundary, not Creech's. It's only just within Creech St Michael's parish. Yes, so within the parish, so that's within their wider jurisdiction, but not from a planning point of view. It's not within their settlement boundary. It's within the Monkton Heathfield settlement boundary.
But it does sit within the boundary of the Creech St Michael local neighbourhood plan.
Yeah. Yes.
It sits within
That's
the
correct.
neighbourhood plan
Yes, it does
and
stretch over
within the
end.
Creech St Michael within the Monkton Heathfield.
I think for clarity, I'm going to bring Norman in, who probably knows as much about the much about the layout of the land there as Simon Fox does. Possibly even more, I'm not sure. Norman, can you clarify any of these points?
I wouldn't claim to know more than Simon,
Oh, well,
definitely not.
No, but
That would be wrong.
But I've known you a long time. Yeah.
Yes, you can be forgiven for this. When Creech drew up their neighbourhood plan, the world ended at the motorway, basically. So when they drew up their neighbourhood plan, they put a green wedge against the southern side of the motorway and never really bothered about what was happening at the other side, even though we all knew that there was MH2 coming along. That's why there's very little comment from Creech in their neighbourhood plan applicable to MH2. So that's the first thing. The other thing, and I would say this, wouldn't I? When we did the community governance review, we missed a trick.
We did.
We should have made the motorway as the moat, the boundary, as has been done in other areas, because it sectionalised up parts of West Monkton and parts of Creech Parish either side of it. This is a small area here that is within the parish. In actual fact, it's useful having that map up just to cement perhaps in your mind. If you took the blue arrow that is on the left-hand top, the settlement boundary, and went across to Monkton Elms, which is the divide of the A38 and the road that goes through Monkton Heathfield. The land to the right of that is Creech St Michael parish. To the left of that is West Monkton. So the vast majority of MH2 site is in actual fact Greece St Michael, but that's for future use. This conjoins or will conjoin. It is not, as Andrew has said, within the plan line of MH2, but what it does miss out, and what we haven't got a definitive line of, but it's not a planning objection, is the fact that the Creech Road that presently comes off of the roundabout and goes over the motorway will swing into the estate, running towards Warford, and then a new road will swing off of it and swing back round, and quite sharply, if it is to miss this site, to join back into the Langella Road. So it will be there, but as it's off the page, so to speak, that bit of the road, I haven't seen the detailed plan for if it is worked up, but it's not material to this consideration. This is, do we want infill there or do we want landscaping? West Monkton would like to see landscaping there because it helps protect the hamlet and protect the views against the new development as well. Yes, there is some further landscaping the other side of the access route, but this site used to be well grown. It's been cleared in recent years.
Two considerations there, I think. The first is we don't have an indicative road layout plan for that particular piece, which is a particularly odd bit of land. And the way the, excuse me, the road configuration would have to be. And it is a very small site. And I'm going to come back to you, Will, and then we're going to move on to other councils, okay? Because I'm trying to keep it all in the same bit, as it were. So, Will.
Just a small point then. If the Monkton Heathfield thing is still in a slight state of flux, is this application slightly opportunistic to take advantage of the situation before somebody decides this is a landscaping buffer or something like that? I mean, no. Okay. I mean, I understand where we are with it.
I think in the parish, in Creech St Michael's parish submission, they actually said it has significant effect on Langana Manor House. I don't know if anybody has looked at that, and I wouldn't want it to be left to reserved matters. So that what will happen is you get the outline plan and they'll put what they like in there, unfortunately. What I would say is, if you're going to grant it, let's have the detail before we actually vote on it. So we could put it back until we've got the reserved matters and what they're going to put on there. Otherwise, it's left to chance.
Thank you for your question. I've just put up the plan there showing the application site, and you can see the manor house there to the far right-hand side. And the conservation officer has reviewed this application and considered their accepting of the setting of the listed building. Clearly, a scheme will need to be of a good standard, and that would be what we would seek as part of any scheme. Obviously, at the moment, members have to consider the principal development, and if you are very concerned about the setting of the listed building, then that can be a valid reason for refusal. But bear in mind, the conservation officer has assessed it on those. I've asked them to assess it on those particular reasons, and they've considered that it is acceptable. So yes, a detailed scheme would need to come forward. Reserved matters would have to be, in terms of materials, an arrangement to make sure that it doesn't adversely affect the setting of the listed building. Thank you, Chair.
Yes, so I'll bring Gary in, then I'll come to Dawn and then Norman, please.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I just wanted to give the committee some advice because, yes, there is the listed building nearby. As Andrew has said, the conservation officer has assessed it, and in terms of its location, a development of 5 houses, the design of which to be established is unlikely to cause harm to its setting. So that's the advice that we give you as a committee. And I understand in a sensitive location, you may want more detail to decide now and inform your decision. But unfortunately, you know, the applicant has, you know, exercised their right to submit an outline planning application. So the things that are up for grabs now is the principle of development, so up to 5, no more, and the means of access. The detail in terms of the layout, the scale of the houses, the materials and so on, have to be looked at a second stage, which will be subject to another application, albeit particularly because of the presence of the protected trees on the site, there's very limited options to actually kind of deviate away from the indicative layout. So whilst I sympathise with members wanting more detail at this stage, you have to look at the application before you, which is just outlined with means of access.
Okay, Dawn?
Yeah, just mindful of a couple of things the agent said. He said there were no objections from statutory consultees, I think. And I'm just still curious then, weren't the parish councils statutory consultees? There are no statutory consultees from the parishes then? But yeah, do you want to answer that first?
Yeah, so on a technical point, statutory consultees, there is a limited group of bodies that are defined as statutory consultees. Now, obviously, parish councils are a very important consultee, but they're not defined as a statutory consultee. But nonetheless, the parish council comments you should be giving weight in your decision making, but with the kind of the footnote that they're not technically statutory.
Sorry, that's my misunderstanding. They quite often refer to themselves as statutory consultees, so that's misled me really, because I thought I think a lot of parishes think of themselves as statutory consultees. Yes. That's very helpful to know that in future. Thank you. I was also surprised to hear that the suggestion had come from a planning officer, and was kind of thinking if it had come from a planning officer, wouldn't they have advised then that more detail would have been a better stage to bring this forward rather than the level of detail we've got at this stage?
Thank you. We have to deal with applications as they come forward. They may or may not take our pre-application advice. We have to deal with the application that is put before us, and they're entitled to bring forward an outline application with all matters reserved. In this case, they brought it forward with all matters reserved except access, and that's what's before us today to determine. Without reading the pre-application advice, I can't comment on what the officer said at that stage. I haven't got that before me.
So just following on from that, can I just check pre-application advice, is that confidential between the applicant and the council? That's not something that we're ever viewed sight of?
No, it's usually confidential because it's commercially confidential at that stage, but often we would include it as part of the report at committee stage. So at this stage, it shouldn't be confidential.
So, well, I'm just still curious why it's been brought forward with this level of, this small detail attached to it, and trying to understand why it wouldn't have been waited for a more detailed planning application, as Rosemary's raised, to come forward. And I can't really get that answer from anyone other than the applicant than the agent.
The applicant can choose to bring it forward with all matters reserved. And if that's what they choose to do, that's what's in front of us. Yeah. Well,
yeah, they just want the principle of development established before they spend time and trouble going to a detailed application and doing all the necessary information and drawings that would be necessary for that.
this is about the concept of planning for housing now of up to 5 units. Because as was explained earlier, were there to be a variation of that number, it would have to be a new application. Okay. Right, Norman, followed by Dave Mansell, please.
Right, just for clarity's sake, Mr. Chairman, as you often see on plans, you see the development in front of you proposed. And quite often you don't see a lot of the other permissions that have already been granted. On this area here, we know that Manor Farm, listed building, has got 33 that we granted 2 months ago, right? The Langala Manor House is the property to the right of this proposed development, and there is the wording Langala in a triangle of land there. In that triangle of land, there is already 2 rather nice 4 or 5 bedroomed houses built with permission for 3 more, right? So that will be built up, right? Then at the top of the picture, you see the steadings, and a bit further up is the listed farmhouse. That's Langala Farm House. So you've got 3 listed buildings in the area. Are you right? Yeah. It's there, believe me. and that is the it is a reasonable distance away. That's why I believe the landscape officer said he doesn't believe it will materially affect it. But this piece of screening on this piece of land, if it is built on, will join up the hamlet of Langala with no doubt, and make it part of the new development effectively, and Monkton Heathfield. The actual MH2 development carries a nice big piece of screening around the back of Langala Farm and down through, and this will not join up with it as screening anymore. It'll become housing. So that's why West Monkton, I think Parish Council has put in the objection, because it'll bring it right up to the new road if the new road doesn't go through this site.
Next, sorry.
Right, thank you very much. A comment first on the pre-application advice. It would be interesting and I think helpful to know what that advice said. I mean, I tend to feel that it would be good practice to put it in the committee report, and I don't know whether the pre-application advice is noted or whether that should be put as part of the documents with the planning application when it comes in. Anyway, that's just a comment on the earlier conversation, that it would be interesting to know what the officers had advised the applicant, and may well be helpful. The point I wish to make, which is prompted by 2 things. One, the comments we've heard from Monkton Heathfield Parish Council about it looking over development and with 5 homes there. And I'd say that was something I was thinking too, particularly prompted by the tree officer comments, who said that the plots, as shown, don't really fit in with the protected trees, particularly as far as shading of the dwellings are concerned and root protection. And given that the trees are protected there, 5 houses does look to be a problem. And so I would welcome sort of hearing whether we could amend that up to 5, whether we could pass on a comment about it, or are we, if we approve this today, saying yes, 5 houses can go there, which I have to say my feeling is 5 looks too many. So comments on that would be helpful, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, in terms of the pre-app, I don't have that to hand. Just I'd like to add, it wasn't my pre-app, this is predated myself, but that's obviously in terms of including pre-app, that's for another discussion, clearly, that you mentioned. The tree officer did comment and got some feedback. The tree officer did comment in principle is okay. One thing I have forgot to mention, and I don't think it's included in the conditions, their initial tree assessment that was submitted with the application one of the recommendations does recommend that an arboricultural method statement is submitted when any application. So that I'll request that that's added as a condition, and that will set out precisely what can be accommodated on there without harming those trees. So we mentioned 5 in relation to your query about 5 dwellings. That is a key constraint within the site, and therefore need to be demonstrated that 5 or whatever number can be satisfactorily accommodated on there for other reasons, but also one of the key reasons to ensure that it doesn't harm the trees outside the accepted root protection areas and so on. But in principle, the tree officer is okay with it, but it will be for the detailed stage to demonstrate with the arboricultural method statement how 5 can be satisfactorily accommodated on site there. The other question. Oh, I mentioned pre-app, sorry, yeah.
Yes, certainly the protection of the trees is part of it. I have to say the amenity of the houses is part of it as well. And then the tree officer commented that one, the difficulty with where the plots were, that they didn't fit well amongst the trees, the plots didn't fit well amongst the trees. He also commented that they will cast shade, drop leaves, seeds and twigs, and may cause anxiety during extreme weather events, all of which will increase the likelihood of proposals to prune or fall or fell. But part of that is the impact on the houses there, which may not be apparent to the dwelling owners to start with. And I've, had people raise these issues with me, which is why I think it's real. When you do build houses under big trees and so on, it can cause problems for people living there. And that is why trying to squeeze 5 onto this site does cause me some concern. And so another part of my question was, can we alter that 5? Are we allowing 5, or could we reduce that number?
I'm going to bring Gary Collins in at this point.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, the straightforward answer to can you reduce the 5 at this stage is no. You have to determine the application before you, which is up to 5. I mean, as Andrew said, reserved matters might come in and there might be some changes or some, to it, and it may come in as less than 5. But at this stage, you must determine it on its merits. So it's up to 5, approve or refuse, basically. Looking at the tree officer comments, which are set out on pages 53 and 54 of the papers, I know the tree officer says in principle no objection, with some reservations, but reservations not objections. And the tree officer goes on to talk about looking at the illustrative layout, which is illustrative. It's it's up for grabs at reserve matter stage if outline permission is granted. Makes reference to the plot in the middle moves slightly north, and plots 1 and 2 move slightly to the south. So I think they are matters of detail with regards to the plots and 5 on there, rather than it being a fundamental issue that 5 is definitely too many. And then the tree officer goes on to say, and councillor, you've made reference to this, that with people living in relatively close proximity to those trees will need management. Now, that's a very typical situation where at the moment, those trees are in an open setting. Once land becomes essentially allocated for some form of development, and that's what's happened here with the boundary in the local plan. Trees should be protected, and if they are to be retained, as in this case, they will necessarily have to come under a different management regime, so more tightly managed than they would be before, because people live close to them. So I think the tree officer's flagging that essentially on balance that the trees and the houses can live side by side, but in order for that to happen, the trees will have to undergo a bit more kind of intensive management than they currently do. But I think that's quite normal for land that is coming forward for housing.
Okay, I would also point at 10.17, the impact on trees and landscaping. The site contains a number of protected trees around the boundary of the site. the Council as a Boroughist has reviewed the proposal and concluded that it should be possible to erect dwellings within the site without causing undue damage to those trees. A detailed agricultural method statement will need to be submitted with any reserved matters application to ensure the appropriate protection of the trees. A condition to secure an agricultural method statement shall be attached accordingly. So the tree officer has explained how he sees the differences, and we had that question of moving one to the south and one to the north side to accommodate that. And there's a request for a stronger statement, a stronger piece of work for trees on that site. Were this initial stage of outline planning permission with all matters reserved other than access be approved for up to 5 dwellings, which is what we're asked to do today, or not? Or not? Does that help, Dave?
It does help and explains the position. That said, and I will mull this over and listen to what else people say, but at the moment I'm still feeling a bit concerned about the number of houses. But anyway, but the comments have been helpful. Thank you.
So just to be very clear, as Andrew's already said in outlining the scheme, the detailed elements of the scheme would come back at reserved matter stage, including layout, scale, landscaping, and the number of dwellings. So there would be another opportunity to assess whether or not the site works for up to 5 dwellings or fewer at that stage.
Okay. Yes, right. Mike Rigby, please. Mike.
Thank you, Chair. Just one question from me. On page 49, we can see the parish council's response, and one of the comments is that the site is not on an allocated site and is in open countryside, and our response to that is that the site is located within the settlement boundary, which seems to give being within a settlement boundary equivalent status to being an allocated site. I wonder if we could just spend a moment to just explore that a little bit more, please.
Thank you, Councillor. Yes, it's not the difference between being set in countryside or having a specific designation is that countryside policies would apply, and therefore you've got a higher bar to assess an application against. Once it's set within a settlement boundary, the principle is in favour of development, obviously subject to making sure all the other considerations, in this case access, are acceptable. But the principle of development is normally acceptable within settlement boundaries. That's why they're drawn. Anything outside of that, that's why they are quite tightly drawn, as you can see on the map we have around Creech St Michael. Anything beyond that, there's countryside policies apply and a much stricter bar applies.
Just to comment further on that, it's not normal to allocate sites for less than 5 homes in a local plan, and that's why it was probably not considered as an allocation when it went through the local plan process.
Thank you. That's the answer I was looking for. Thanks, Alison.
Okay, that's the first round done. Ladies, gentlemen, any further comments? Any further questions? Not seeing any. Andrew.
From what I've heard, I'm happy to propose that we recommend planning on this one, Simon. Thank you.
Sorry, Chair, with the addition of the arboricultural method statement as a condition, because I don't think it's attached. Thank you, sorry.
With the clarification that's just been repointed out to me, and that we need the arboreal statement, management statement to be appended as well. Can I see those in favour of that, please? 2, 5, 6. And are those against, please? 1, and those and abstaining. So 2 abstentions. I was going to say I can't count. My apologies. I realised as I opened my mouth that I had the wrong number. Okay, that is then passed. So we look forward to it coming back with a more detailed application where we will be able to look at, and I'm sure will scrutinise any details that we feel require further exploration. Okay, thank you very much indeed. Now we move on now to our last item on our agenda, which is our planning appeals. I'm going to bring Gary Collins in again on this, who's going to lead us through this month's appeals.
Thank you, Chair. And I know not only do you have the headline of the decision, you've got the actual decision letters themselves. So I'll keep it fairly brief and obviously can answer any questions that members may have. So we've got three appeal decisions this time around. The first one relates to the Blue Anchor Bay Caravan Park, and this was an appeal against the council's refusal to issue a lawful use certificate, basically confirming that a particular part of the site had been used for 34 caravans over a lawful period. It had been refused by the council because the information put forward was very sketchy, and the council was not convinced that the evidence was there in order to issue a certificate. And the inspector reflects on this on paragraph number 4 of the decision, where confirms that the burden is on the appellant to demonstrate their case on the balance of probability, and saying that planning merits are not relevant. It wasn't a planning application, it was a case of has the land been used for the relevant period of time. And so additional and tidied up evidence was submitted to the inspector, because this was the subject of a hearing a few weeks ago. So there was like a target date for everyone to aim for, and the appellants basically polished up their evidence, and it has led to the inspector considering that the evidence was kind of just about good enough, and that the council itself didn't have any evidence to contradict the appellant's version of events. So, and setting out again in paragraph 4 that the test is if an appellant's evidence is sufficiently precise and unambiguous, then it should be accepted. And so the inspector concludes and makes reference in his conclusion about evidence now available. So it was fairly new to the hearing that on balance of probability that he felt that a certificate could be given for the use of that land. And just hasten to say, it's just a reflection of the use of that land. It's not a prejudgment of other parts of the area that I believe are proposed for a similar use, where merits arguments will come into play. So that was that decision there. Then the second one relates to the proposal to remove a condition at Upham's Barn in Stoke St Gregory. Now, this was a condition imposed at the time for dwellings, because it was conditioned that the dwellings could only be occupied by persons employed at the Willow and Wetlands Centre. So it was a very tightly worded condition, and the appellants, so that had been refused. Well, I think it had been appeal against non-determination. So the council gets a statutory period to make its decision. The appellant decided to escalate that to the planning inspectorate, and so it was considered on that basis. And as you'll see from the decision letter, the inspector considers the very narrow nature of the condition, understanding that the dwellings hadn't actually been used a great deal by employees of the centre, and also circumstances had changed about relating to the EU, and whether kind of workers from abroad were coming across to be the kind of in-house experts in the crafts that are on display there, and felt that that there'd been limited use. Also felt that whilst the units hadn't actually been marketed, a marketing exercise for the narrowness of the condition probably wouldn't have been successful anyway, and therefore, as by virtue of that, felt that the use of the open use of the dwellings by anybody was in fact compliant with local policy. He felt that that there was services nearby. So obviously the council had taken a contrary view to that, but the inspector felt that it was an acceptable removal of the condition, and so that appeal again was allowed. Then the final one was an example of backland development at Windham Road in Taunton, where The situation was that there was a lodge in the back garden, but a certificate of lawfulness had been granted to confirm that the lodge had actually been used as a separate unit of accommodation. So with that in the background, the application had been made to replace it, but the siting of it had changed, and also the materials and the design, I think the council had felt would be quite jarring and contrary to the character and appearance of the area. The inspector agreed with that and dismissed the appeal, but equally noted that since the appeal had been decided, been lodged, that the council had considered a changed proposal and had granted permission for that had addressed the issues before the appeal. So the design was better, it was lower level, it was flat roof, and it would have a neutral effect on the local area. The inspector concluded that the appeal proposal wouldn't have a detrimental impact on the amenities of the house where the property was in the back garden, but for the appeal case, that the available open space wasn't acceptable to those occupants, but felt that the permission that the council had granted actually had provided improved amenity space. So again, it was one of those on balance things. So yeah, the inspector dismissed the appeal, but in the meantime, the council had already granted permission for a better scheme. But it was good that the standards were upheld by that inspector. So that's why covering of those issues this month, Chair. Happy to take any questions.
Questions? Well,
Yeah, thanks. In relation to the Willow and Wetlands Centre, was the restriction simply to workers, or was it the more widely accepted rural workers, rural forestry workers?
In this case, it was restricted to the workers at the centre, and the inspector took it in that light really, and felt that in current circumstances the condition was unreasonable, and therefore just took it away. Didn't amend it to agricultural workers in general, and so limited his assessment to whether it was reasonable to keep a condition on for just workers of the properties.
So she didn't think it was relevant to sort of widen the restriction, so it's now open house. I mean, I think, as you know, I'm quite concerned about the fate of rural workers' properties and it seems to me that they're gradually being eroded, and decisions like this really don't help. And it's something I think we really do need to address in the upcoming local plan if we are to try and retain any sort of rural housing, affordable housing for rural workers, rural forestry workers.
I couldn't agree more.
There's a coach and horses being driven through at the moment.
Another relevant question would be the level of rent set for so-called tied properties, because I think that's relevant as well. And I think it's something that we would be well advised to pick up in our new local plan as that's going forward.
Well, one of my issues is the valuation and the valuation methodology behind these things. I will be writing to the Royal Institute of Chartered Surveyors to query this, because I think some of the 30% discount on houses is ludicrous, of something that's over £500,000. So, but I will be looking at it, and so perhaps there'll be some changes.
Yeah, I think one consolation is that the inspector, she chose to limit herself to that condition, is acceptable or not, and not go into any middle ground. So I think this isn't a case that can be quoted by other applicants as an erosion in itself of the agricultural workers' property
Although
approach.
the effect is the same ultimately. Mike, you want to come in?
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick one. No costs on the ones we lost. Brilliant. Thank you.
Okay, it's always important. Costs are always important. Okay, but no, Will, I agree with you. The erosion of tied properties and how we get agricultural workers to be able to afford to live within the area they are working in is another problem. And it is something that I would like to see we make some clear statements on across the whole of the county when we do our Pan Somerset local plan. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, any other quiz or questions for officers? No, in that case, I'd like to thank you for your attendance and wish you a pleasant rest of the afternoon and the rest of your week. Good afternoon, one and all.